Coming up on this edition of Primetime News, South Korea bows out of the 2014 World Cup in Brazil on Thursday following a 1-0 loss to Belgium. Mixed signals on Korea's economic recovery. Industrial output for the month of May shrinks for the second straight month. And a look at fresh dynamics in Northeast Asia. Is North Korea cozying up with Japan now rather than its traditional ally, China?
Hello and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sean Lim.
Happy Friday, everyone. I am Kang Chiri. We now have the names of all 16 teams that are staying behind in Brazil for the remainder of the World Cup 2014, and Korea is not on the list. Unfortunately, Korea lost its group match against Belgium 1-0, packing up with a draw and 2 losses.
Arirang News' Song Ji-sun joins us now for the wrap-up of Team Korea's rather disappointing performance at this year's World Cup.
You know, even before this last match, there were conditions to be met. Korea had to win Belgium by a massive victory, and Russia had to either beat or draw with Algeria. But hope of advancing to the next round has faded as Algeria and Russia drew 1-1 on Thursday. Now, coach Hong Myung-bo finally changed his mind to put Kim Shin-wook as the lone striker in his lineup and even replaced goalkeeper Jung Sung-ryong with Kim Seung-gyu. Kim actually fared well in his World Cup debut, but he loses a goal as Belgium's Vertonghen nets after Kim failed to hang on to a shot. Just before the end of the first half, Belgium's Steven Defour was sent off for stepping on Kim Shin-wook's ankle, but the Korean squad could not make the most out of their numerical advantage.
Now, the question still remains, were the best 11 really the best 11 for Korea?
Not for the first 2 matches. Apparently, Coach Hong wanted this magic from Park Ji-young like he did in the last London Olympics, where he brought home the bronze medal, but that match did not work in Brazil. In fact, Park, who's been sitting on the bench for most of the time in his club, started Korea's first 2 critical matches, only to go unnoticed for the whole while. Park leaves Brazil without a single goal or run at the goal, and the 2 other forwards playing in domestic league replaced Park in the second half for the first 2 matches. Now, Lee Gun-ho, serving in the military and playing for the Army team's Hangmu, scored while playing less than a half, and the total Kim Shin-wook did well fighting off the Algerian and the Belgian players for the ball. On the bright side, Korea's young midfielders who play in the European League showed greater potential. Now, Son Heung-min scored in his first World Cup as the youngest player on the squad, and Captain Koo Jae-tae also played his part as Ki Sung-ryong backed the strikers as much as he possibly could.
So this was a poor performance for Korea, but also we weren't alone in the region. Other Asian teams did not do as well this time around.
Right, a total of 4 Asian teams all failed to advance the next round. And in fact, this is the Korea's worst result since the 1990 World Cup in France and represents a step back for the team as it reached the round of 16 in the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Now, with Korea's exit from Brazil, Asia will not be represented in the round of 16, and without a single victory in 24 years, the region's quota could be at a risk. Now, there are quite a lot of analysis of why the Asian squads could not fare well in this World Cup, and the reasons are they are trying to catch up with the European or the South American strongholds in football. But the thing is, the strongholds are progressing faster and evolving while the Asian squads are trying to catch up. And as we saw in the match, their physicals were not strong enough as the players there. And we have to also note that the Korea's infrastructure for actually supporting the K-League has also been beefed up to actually support the players who are playing in the domestic league as well.
So that's the homework over the next 4 years. Thank you for coming in today and sharing this story with us, Ji-sun.
Pleasure.
And for other matches on Thursday and games over the weekend, we now go over to Stephen at the Sports Center. So, Stephen, not only we won't be seeing any more of Team Korea, but we won't be seeing Ronaldo at the World Cup.
Hey guys, that's right, Sean. Unfortunately, we won't be seeing any more of Cristiano Ronaldo and Portugal after their win over Ghana in their final Group G match. Despite a bum knee, Ronaldo was an offensive force throughout, as was Ghana's Asamoah Gyan, who equalized in the 57th minute to become the all-time leading scorer out of Africa with 6 goals. Meanwhile, Ronaldo finally found net to put Portugal up 2-1 over Ghana, but the low-scoring win effectively cut short both teams' rise to the round of 16. And that brings us to the meeting between the U.S. and Germany, who are pretty much fighting for positioning in the group, especially as the scoring in the Ghana-Portugal game stalled. Germany was dominant on the ball, but the Americans held firm until the keeper error led to a Thomas Mueller's 4th goal of the tournament. Despite having 4 points each, the U.S. advanced over Portugal on goal difference, along with Germany. Now Germany faces Algeria and the U.S. meets Belgium in the next round. And just like that, the brackets are now set for the round of 16 with the field whittled down from 32. Let's take a look. Now it's a single elimination tournament, which means that matches will go the distance with 2 15-minute halves of extra time and penalty shootouts if necessary. Simply, a win allows a team to advance, a loss gets them eliminated. And looking into the weekend matches, Brazil and Chile meet on Saturday 1 p.m. local time or 1 a.m. Sunday here in Korea. In the later matches, Colombia faces Uruguay minus star striker Luis Suarez, who was banned for his biting incident. On Sunday local time or early Monday morning in Korea, the Netherlands goes up against Mexico and Costa Rica meets Greece in the evening match. And as you can imagine, the fans were disappointed at South Korea's ouster from the World Cup. And although they knew that making the next round would be a long shot, the Red Devils still showed up for watch parties across the nation. I'll leave you with Shin Se-min, who has the story.
Upset about losing the match against Belgium, Korean fans left the last cheering venue for the Brazil World Cup with their heads held low. Korea's elimination also spells the end to all Asian hopes in the tournament. Thousands of fans had been cheering on the streets in front of COEX in southern Seoul since early Thursday evening, some 10 hours before the kickoff. The fans, hoping a red card for Belgium in the first half would make it easier to win, couldn't hide their disappointment after the game.
I thought we had the advantage when I saw the Belgian player get a red card. I really think we could have done a better job.
Even against a Belgium team down to 10 men, the game didn't go well. The result is very regrettable. I wish there was another chance.
The fans spent all night waiting, and pre-game K-pop performances were held at the venue to keep the early birds motivated and entertained. With the fall of the national team in Brazil, some supporters are already looking ahead to the 2018 World Cup.
It's a great shame we didn't make it to the last 16. Now we'll just wait for the next World Cup in 4 years' time.
Failing to advance to the final 16, Korea will have to go again in 2018 World Cup in Russia. The fans had fun, and everyone thanks the squad for trying their best in Brazil. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Curry's comments came in response to
your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Che-ri from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Korea's production in the mining and manufacturing sectors dropped last month by the biggest margin in more than 5 years, raising concerns of a slowdown in economic recovery. But analysts say it's still a bit too early to call this drop a trend. Hwang Ji tells us why.
Korea's pace of economic recovery is in question once again, with the nation's output in the manufacturing and mining sector falling 2.7% in May from a month earlier. That marks the biggest drop since December 2008 when the global financial crisis broke. Statistics Korea says that the dip came largely from the automobile and semiconductor industry, which saw sluggish exports last month, but added that the weak data does not necessarily mean the Korean economy is losing momentum.
The dip in exports are mainly due to fewer working days in May, prompted by long holiday weekends, while exports to Southeast Asian nations also remained poor.
In fact, while Korea's overall exports dropped 1% last month from a year earlier, the average daily export volume rose 6% to around $2.2 billion, the second highest level in history. Looking forward, experts also say it's likely that the Korean economy will remain on the track to recovery thanks to the U.S. economy, which has a huge effect on the nation's exports.
Although the first quarter growth in the United States was held back by an unusually cold winter, recent employment and consumption data are showing a firm upward trend.
And the nation's output data was not all negative. Service sector production rose 0.6% in May from a month ago after declining more than 1% in April. Retail sales also rose 1.5%, a sign that the economy might be out of the sluggish private spending trap brought on by the deadly ferry disaster. Although it added that more research is needed, the statistics agency said the Korean economy hit a low point sometime in late 2012 or early 2013. And based on that analysis, the economy should now be on a rebound trend. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A day after President Park Geun-hye turned down his resignation and retained him, Prime Minister Chung Hong-won had a tearful encounter with the families of the Sewol ferry passengers who are still missing. The Prime Minister visited Chindo Island on this Friday near the site of the April ferry sinking and promised the families that he will pour his energy into reforming the country and finding the remaining 11 victims. He also vowed to find a way for these victims to be remembered forever and set up a hotline between his office and the families. Chung had offered to resign to take responsibility for the government's lax response to the ferry accident, but has since visited Chindo to show his commitment to the recovery process.
The diplomatic dynamics in Northeast Asia are complex, to say the least, with historical and territorial differences meeting head-on with security concerns. But recently, North Korea and Japan have been cozying up. Our Connie Kim reports on the latest developments.
9 Japanese nationals are in Pyongyang through next Thursday to pay their respects to relatives who died in North Korea after the Second World War.
After a lot of efforts between the Japanese and North Korean government, our hope has finally come true.
There have been 8 visits like this one since 2012, but yesterday's comes against the backdrop of a new dynamic in Sino-Japanese relations. That is, since North Korea and Japan agreed last month to reopen an investigation into the whereabouts of Japanese abductees kidnapped by the North decades ago. Diplomats from Tokyo and Pyongyang will meet in China next week to discuss the details of a probe into the abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. North Korean officials are set to explain how a special committee plans to carry out its investigation. Now, if Japan feels the North is doing enough to reopen the probe, unilateral sanctions imposed by Tokyo on the North Korean regime could be eased, including the lifting of a ban on North Korean vessels into Japanese ports. Interesting timing, given that Chinese President Xi Jinping is set to visit Seoul next Thursday for a 2-day state visit. And he is not expected to stop by Pyongyang, going against the tradition that Chinese leaders have made it a point to visit the North before coming to Seoul. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
In what has become a regular occurrence, North Korea launched 3 short-range projectiles into the East Sea on Thursday afternoon. However, unlike other recent tests, this one centered on a new type of missile that South Korean authorities say had never been fired before. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
North Korea claimed Friday that the 3 projectiles it fired into the East Sea on Thursday were newly developed state-of-the-art precision-guided missiles. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was at the scene on Thursday and watched over the launch process. The missiles were airborne for around 190 kilometers before landing in waters between North Korea and Japan. The projectiles bear a similarity to North Korea's KN-09 missiles, but the maximum range was 40 kilometers, further than a KN-09.
The primary goal of North Koreans' every activities regarding the threatening other neighboring countries, particularly towards Seoul and Washington, is the stabilize or solidify about Kim Jong-un regime's survival. They want to make a new pressure toward getting back to the six-party talks, so-called denuclearization process.
In February and March, Pyongyang fired off ballistic missiles and short-range projectiles on 8 separate occasions. In March and April, the regime conducted numerous naval exercises near the northern limit line, increasing inter-Korean tensions along the border. Some experts say the most recent firing was initiated to unite North Korean troops behind Hyun Yong-chol, who is the new minister of the People's Armed Forces, after Chang Jong-nam was relieved of this post.
In one way, it could be seen as a test of the military's missile capabilities. It could also be a way to check the response times of the U.S., South Korea, and Japan.
Following this latest test firing, the South's Defense Ministry says it's on alert for additional provocations from the north. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A new Hollywood comedy dealing with an assassination plot against North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has caught the attention of Pyongyang. It warned that the release of the film, which is due out in the fall, would be an act of war. The co-director of the movie says Pyongyang is overreacting. So will the film hit the theaters? Our Kwon So-ah tells us more.
Could a comedy movie trigger a war? According to our North Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson, yes. North Korea has come out all guns blazing against the first ever American movie dealing with its leader, Kim Jong-un. The Interview is an action comedy that centers on how a talk show host and his producer, played by James Franco and Seth Rogen, embark on a CIA mission to assassinate Kim. Rogen, who also co-directed the movie, says he was inspired by journalists making trips to the communist country and hypothetical discussions on how they would be in the ideal position to assassinate the world's most dangerous people. But as can be seen in the trailer, the movie is hardly sinister in nature. However, it was enough for North Korea to call the movie an act of terrorism and an act of war. Pyongyang's foreign ministry spokesperson threatened merciless retaliation if the film is released. Seth Rogen is not taking the threat too seriously. Upon hearing of the North's reaction to the teaser, Rogen tweeted, "People don't usually want to kill me for one of my movies until after they've paid $12 for it." Days before the North's threat, Rogen had tweeted, "Apparently Kim Jong-un plans on watching The Interview. I hope he likes it." The Interview is expected to hit big screens in the US in October. No word yet on whether it will be released in South Korea. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And it's time now to get a recap on this week's domestic headlines.
Our Yulian is here with us.
Good evening now. President Park Geun-hye's decision to turn down Prime Minister Chung Hong-won's offer to resign after 2 failed attempts to appoint a new prime minister was dealt with heavily by the today's papers. You see Prime Minister Chung Hong-won on the front pages here. And let's take a look at the Jungang-ilbo, which published a political cartoon that pokes fun at the entire ordeal. You can see Prime Minister Chung's legs on the right and President Park on the left holding a shovel. Now, it looks like she has just dug him out of a deep hole, and she's seen cheering him on, but in a meek voice and timid manner. The papers have questioned whether Chung will be able to overcome his mishandling of the Sewol ferry disaster and carry out reforms after already having offered his resignation. Now moving on to Jungang-ilbo, and the headline here reads, "From Facebook to book, Age of Snug." Now, the word snug is a word that combines SNS and book, and the article says that popular pieces of writing from social networks are being published into books and actually becoming bestsellers, giving birth to the word snug. Now, this week, the second best-selling item on a major online bookstore was actually a snug. Now, it consisted of Facebook postings compiled by a young man in his mid-20s. Now, publishers say by looking at the number of likes and comments a post gets, they can actually predict how well the books will sell. The paper also adds that it's a win-win for up-and-coming writers as well, who can better attract investors to help them publish a book. Now moving on to Joseon-ilbo, which has a story on Korea's main financial district. The headline here reads, "A young mind marching out of Yeouido." Now, Yeouido is an area in Seoul that is Korea's equivalent of Wall Street, and the article says the financial district is losing young business minds. Now, zooming in closer, taking a look at the graph here, the darker line in the graph shows the falling proportion of those in their 20s and 30s, while the lighter line below shows the rising proportion of 30 and 40-somethings. This is because companies are cutting down on new employment or choosing not to hire anyone at all as they see their profitability falter due to the slowing economy. Now, naturally, already employed 20 to 30-year-olds feel more of a burden on their shoulders. Now, this here on the right is a resignation letter from a 30-year-old man who says he spent all day doing paperwork for all his co-workers who are over 40 years old, and says he decided to leave because he simply sees no future in Korea's financial industry. Now, that does it for this week's look at some of the eye-catching stories in the Korean press.
The European Union has signed a major partnership agreement with Ukraine that will move this country closer to the West as it's struggling to deal with pro-Russian aggression.
With more on that story, we turn now to Paul Yee, who's standing by at the News Center. Paul, this is a historic pact for Kiev and the EU, and it's one that deals with the heart of the crisis in Ukraine.
Absolutely. The signing is being seen as a victory for pro-EU Ukrainians who fought a bloody battle to oust Russian-backed President Viktor Yanukovych from power back in February. The agreement signed on Friday, which also includes Georgia and Moldova, establishes a broad political and trade accord with the European Union. The three countries will now have a greater access to the 28-nation bloc, the world's largest and wealthiest single market. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko hailed the signing as a historic day for his country.
Over the last month, Ukraine paid the highest possible price to make her European dreams come true. It must be worth something, for instance, to finally consider a simple statement of the part of the EU. Once Ukraine will be ready, it will be in. A statement that could cost the EU nothing, but would mean the world of my country.
Moscow, meanwhile, has voiced strong opposition to the new partnership. Russian President Vladimir Putin said making Ukraine choose between Russia and the EU would tear the country apart. And leaders of the European Union have gathered in Brussels to decide who will be the next president of the European Commission. Luxembourg's former Prime Minister Jean-Claude Juncker is widely expected to be approved for the job. The position is one of the EU's most powerful, with sway over legislation affecting 500 million people.
It's an issue of balance between the institutions. It has not been about names for me. I think it's the right principle, once you have an election result, that the biggest group in European Parliament can put forward a candidate, and that's Jean-Claude Juncker.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has fiercely opposed Juncker's likely nomination, saying the premier lacks the will and the skills to reform the EU. He warned fellow leaders bluntly that they were about to make a mistake in backing him, warning of, quote, dire consequences. And Chinese President Xi Jinping has welcomed his Myanmar counterpart Thein Sein to Beijing as the two leaders kick off 4 days of bilateral talks. The welcome ceremony on Friday saw both leaders inspect the Guard of Honor in front of the Great Hall of the People before sitting down for discussions. President Thein Sein had accepted Xi's invitation to take part in celebrating the 60th anniversary of the 5 Principles of Peaceful Coexistence by China, Myanmar, and India. Indian Vice President Mohammad Ansari is also invited to attend the commemorative activities in Beijing, which will run through Sunday. And finally, the iconic comic book character Batman is celebrating his 75th birthday with the opening of a new attraction in Burbank, California at Warner Brothers Studios. The special exhibition opened on Thursday and features a wide range of vehicles, costumes, and other memorabilia from the franchise. Actor Danny DeVito, who played the villain the Penguin in 1992, was at the opening.
I mean, you gotta have a handsome guy play that part. I mean, you can't get Paul Giamatti to play Batman. I mean, in all due respect, Paul is a very nice guy and a good actor, great actor. But you need somebody like, like who fits in the suit.
The Cape Crusader first appeared in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. Batman went on to become one of the world's most popular superheroes, only relying on his wits, training in high-tech gadgets in his quest for justice. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here next week. It was a hot summer day here in Seoul, but we may get showers tomorrow.
For more, our Kim Bo-kyung joins us from the Weather Center. So, Bo-kyung, Saturday is not going to be the best day for outdoor activities.
Unfortunately not, as showers are expected for some regions, dropping 5 to 40 millimeters of rain. This rainfall should begin in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province tomorrow morning. However, the sun should make its way out by Sunday. At the moment, we are seeing partly cloudy skies across the map. The discomfort index is rising by the day, with monsoon rains for the inland regions a month behind schedule. Plus, temperatures continue to heat up. So this weekend, let's try to take things easy. On to Saturday's readings. Seoul hits 28 while Daegu reaches the low 30s. Moving on, Daejeon makes it to 29, Jeju to the mid-20s. Now ending off with World Cup weather, it's a mixed forecast over in Brazil, with average daytime highs that are making it to the mid-20s. Have a lovely Friday night, and I'll be back with more after midnight.
All right, thanks, Bo-kyung, and that wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.
Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Bye-bye.